how do you deliberately change your way of being and therefore transform how you interact with the world?
By doing it over and over and over again.
But and what exactly do you do then?
Well, for instance, you wake up in the morning and you say, okay, today no aversion. And then you go through the day watching whether there are any occasions for aversion. If there aren't and you have no aversion, you rejoice with yourself. You say, oh, you congratulate yourself. You're a really good guy, you know, no aversion today.
Yeah.
And you're happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
So although this sounds silly maybe, but it's how described in the discourses.
All right.
One goes through the day, and if no unwholesome realities emerge, then one just rejoices of that, because that's very good. And you find a source of happiness in things that are not there, which is extremely important, extremely rare thing to think about. You can be happy because of certain things are not there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're happy for the absence of something. And then if aversion is there, oh no, then you have work to do. So what's the work? Not giving in, not following it, not believing it. And of course, in the beginning, it might be difficult because it might be very persuasive. So you need a bit more strategy and tactics for resisting the story. But after a bit of practice, then you'll manage eventually to just disrupt the habit. Because the more you disrupt the habit, the less that is a habit. Aversion is a habit. What's the cause of aversion? Aversion in the past. So how do you disrupt aversion? By start disrupting aversion once, twice, 3 times, very often. When you do more often than not, then aversion is no longer habit. It's just a residue. So, and the more often you do it, the weaker it becomes. How long does it take? That, of course, it's contingent on people and circumstances. Mm-hmm. But the practice in itself, it's fairly straightforward.
So then if you encounter something that you feel aversion towards, how do you deal with that? Do you tell yourself, don't feel aversion, don't feel aversion, don't feel aversion until it works? Do you avoid it? Do you, redefine whatever it is in your head that you feel aversion against?
Well, one helpful way is to distinguish between the different ingredients of experience. So for instance, when there is aversion, usually there is a perception, and there is a feeling, and there is an intention. Now, the perception is what you see, for instance. Say you see a person you don't like. Mm-hmm. Then there is the feeling. Usually when there is aversion, it's unpleasant feeling. Mm-hmm. You see the person, you feel some displeasure or uncomfort. And then aversion is a reaction. Now, we think that aversion is a reaction against the perception, but this is wrong. Aversion is a reaction against the feeling. So the perception is neutral. It doesn't feel anything and doesn't have any immediate reaction with it. Mm-hmm. So first of all, you distinguish the 3 things, and then you start realizing that the perception itself is not a problem. So the person, yes, you might feel uncomfortable with that person, but probably you can see the person from other sides, or other people could see the same person and not feel uncomfortable. So the same perception doesn't have always the same feeling. Mm-hmm. First, you realize that you dissociate the feeling from the perception. You realize that the problem is not the perception, is not the person, is the feeling.
Yeah.
Then you realize, okay, I have aversion against this unpleasant feeling. But where is the problem? Is the unpleasant feeling or in the aversion? Well, you might think, well, it's the unpleasant feeling. That's why I'm averse to it, because it's unpleasant. But this is wrong, because an unpleasant feeling, if you had no aversion against it, it couldn't be a problem at all. In order to be a problem, you need not to want it. Mm-hmm. Imagine all sorts of things that are slightly painful, or even a lot painful, that you would go through nonetheless because you want to get to some other result. Picture a gym.
Yeah.
People do all sorts of stuff, mm-hmm. right? It's from mild unpleasant to heavily unpleasant for getting some result that they're really fond of, mm-hmm. right? So unpleasant by itself is not necessarily an object that needs to be a problem, right?
Yes.
So the only problem is the aversion. So you're left with that. You have a perception, not a problem, a feeling, not a problem, and just aversion. That's the problem. But now it's like cut from the rest of the situation. And then you can just watch that. And the whole story that supports that aversion, like how bad that person is and how detrimental is it for your life and how much you should avoid it and so forth, that's all ridiculous now, all meaningful or meaningless. So basically it loses its power in this way.